The following is brought to you by Alberta Milk, representing Alberta's dairy farmers.
So, dairy cattle, when you think about it, we ask a lot of them and we ask a lot of their feet. So cows are designed to walk relatively long distances outside on pasture, and they lay down for a lot of the day. When you start to raise cattle as dairy cows, you're bringing them inside, they're standing on concrete, the environment is much wetter, their diet is much richer, they don't walk as far, and because we've designed their beds, they just don't lay down as much, so they spend a lot more time standing on their feet. And when you put all these things together, what it means is that that cow's foot is under an awful lot of stress. And so it's becoming apparent now that when you look at productivity data, that one of the most significant diseases to the dairy industry is lameness. And most of these diseases are different from the diseases that we would see in, say, beef cattle, because we've created the problem. And so the things we're seeing in particular are sole ulcers, abscesses, and digital dermatitis. And those three diseases together account for the largest proportion of the lameness that we see here. And so, both treating those and preventing them is a really important job for the average dairy producer. Sole ulcers really are a problem of weight bearing. When cattle are outside, they will lay down for approximately 16 or 17 hours a day. In the best run cattle barns, it's hard to get your cattle laying down for more than about 14 hours a day. So these cows are standing on their feet for much longer than they're supposed to. The other problem that becomes is that because they're not walking, their feet aren't wearing the same way. And so what you'll often see in dairy cattle is that the toe grows longer and the heel does wear. And what this does, rather than the cow bearing weight on a nice flat foot, as her toe grows longer, the weight is transferred back to the heel. And the heel really isn't designed to bear a lot of weight. The other thing that we start seeing in these cows is they're walking, they've got big udders, they walk unevenly. They walk a lot on their hind outside foot. And so the heel of the outside hind claw is under a lot of stress. And as these cows are walking around bearing more weight than they should, you basically get a continual thump right on the back of that heel. And what happens then is you start to get disruption of the quick, the tissue that's forming the horn. And when you look at cow feet, it's not uncommon when you're trimming them to see an area of bruising right back here in the heel. Now, bruising is the first sign. If you do nothing about it and you continue to beat the hell out of that area, eventually that quick will die. When the quick dies, it stops forming horn, and over time you get a hole growing from the inside out. So you end up with a channel all the way through the hoof, and now when that animal stands in the feces or urine or whatever, all that material goes straight up through that hole, right into the deep tissues of the foot. And if that sets up an infection, that's a life-threatening condition because it's really hard to clean up. So trying to prevent that condition, really it's important to make sure that your cows are comfortable, that they're laying down, that your cow's feet are trimmed regularly, because it's a different environment. They're not going to wear naturally. So getting their feet trimmed, trimming that toe and getting the weight bearing back to where it should be is really important. And trying to prevent this condition, because treating it is a fool's game. It'll cost you a lot, the prognosis is poor, your best bet is to prevent it.
Okay.
Abscesses are very similar to what we see in beef cattle, but we see more of them in dairy cattle. And an abscess is, the problem there is, when an animal goes lame with an abscess, it's a really painful condition, because that abscess is trapped between horn on one side, bone on the other. And anybody who's seen an abscess knows, it's an abscess because it swells. Well, there's nowhere to swell. You've got a solid tissue on one side, solid tissue on the other. There's incredible pressure in there. The only way to relieve that pain is to drain the abscess. So you need to drain that abscess, get it cleaned out, and that animal will heal up really well, as long as you catch it early. Digital dermatitis is different because it's an infectious disease. It's a bacteria that spreads cow to cow. It spreads in dairy barns because it's wet, and this disease spreads very, very quickly. It can spread like wildfire, and really, in many ways, you want to try and clean your barn up, but the best ways to help control that are actually to use medicated foot baths to try and treat the animals, try and reduce the level of infection. And most importantly, if you don't have digital dermatitis in your herd, you don't want to get it. So you need to be really careful about where you're getting your replacements from, because the last thing you want to do is buy this disease in and then have to deal